Tim Gaze here, and I'm celebrating 20 years of Retrospectives with John Broughton on 3SER, Casey Radio. Well done, John.
Go right back to begin with. Do you remember your first guitar?
Oh, my first guitar? Yeah, I think the first guitar was one that my brother gave me. See, he's 7 years older than me, and he had a guitar. And he mucked around with it, a little bit of Spanish guitar, and he kind of got into it a little bit from memory, and then he sort of stopped, and he didn't play it all that much. And then when he'd go out, and I realised it was in the cupboard, so I used to get in there and open it up and have a bit of a look and a bit of a muck around, and then put it back again and put it back in the cupboard, and I thought everything was pretty cool. Anyway, on my 11th birthday, he surprised me by actually saying, "Happy birthday, here's a guitar." I said, "What?" And he went, "I know you've been whipping in there and sneaking it out and having a play and putting it back." He said, "I know you've been doing that." So he said, "You may as well have it, mate, because you're obviously enjoying it." And so he did. He gave me my first guitar, which was great. So I just kept going after that, which was great. He actually gave me another guitar many years later as well, so he's actually given me two guitars.
Oh, wow.
It's all his fault, you see.
So
it was a famous classical or Spanish guitar, famous.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you really started getting serious about it all, who were the first guitar players that really grabbed your attention?
Well, I suppose probably nothing really out of the box or strange, really. I started when I was about 12, 13, around that age. The people I started listening to, well, I think House of the Rising Sun was probably one of the first things I heard, the Animals, and but not long after that, it was like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and those kind of really mainstream, popular, I suppose, almost pop they would have been known as in those days. With Cream and Hendrix, they were my first couple of main influences. A little later, different people, Jeff Beck, John McLaughlin, all kinds of different players. And then the blues people more later started appreciating more of the blues stuff after that. The real Ritchie blues stuff from the black guys, the people doing all that stuff, and I started appreciating those styles more, like John L. Hooker and Booker White and different people like that, and Ledger, and that came sort of later on, more so than earlier on. First off, I started emulating on people like Clapton and stuff, that blues, that sort of style, which is like Albert Lee, wasn't it? Albert Lee sort of was that kind of style. Was later on. It's funny. You hear the English ones and the pop stuff first, and then you realise that it was all these other people were doing that sort of stuff much earlier on. And when you're young, you don't realise that all this stuff had come before. So it's when you realise that it all happened before that you start realising how great some of that stuff really is.
So tell us about Stonehenge, which was an early band of yours.
Stonehenge, you are going back, aren't you? Stonehenge, Nigel Macara was my friend he's a drummer who we started, he was an Ariel, first Ariel as well, and we started that band together, and Warren Ward was the bass player who came from a band called the Flying Circus, and his brother, I'm just trying to think of his name now. I should know. I've got a mental block then. What was he's a blues guy anyway, he's around. Ward. God, I can't think of his name.
Ross Ward, isn't it?
Ross, his brother, of course. I'm just walking around the backyard here. I'm trying to think. Yeah, Ross. And so it was Ross and his brother, Warren, and Nigel and myself, And we were just playing like covers a lot of the time, a bit of Zeppelin, a few bits and pieces from the late 60s, a bit of Cream, a bit of Hendrix and stuff. But it was also probably the first time we felt like we were trying to write songs, really. We tried to write a few songs in those days. I remember Nigel and I sitting in the back of his combi trying to write a tune, and I can even remember the lyrics to the first verse. I think it was, "Take me back to a window in the sun where I will always be free." Can you believe that? Weird. But there you go. So that lasted a while. I don't know. Probably, a year, half a year or a year or somewhere. Then I I heard that Tamam Shud were looking for a guitar player after that, so I went off to do that.
Now, you were considered quite the young guitar whiz at the time. Was it difficult fitting in with older musicians, and were you well accepted by audiences at that time, by the older audiences?
Remarkably, I reckon. Yeah. It seemed I was accepted pretty well. When I listen back to when I look back at some of the things I did and some of the things I said at that age, I get feel very embarrassed about it and don't know why people cut me as much slack as maybe they did. Maybe they were a bit more forgiving in those days. They're probably more forgiving than I'd be. But because there was a bit of a thing there about, this guy's, really young and he's playing in the band, and I was 15 or something when I first had a jam with the Shud guys, and that would, somehow or other that kind of stuff got used in publicity or beefed up a bit. When I listen back to some of the stuff I was playing, I just go, I just cringe, because it wasn't really as technically professional or as thoughtful as it could have been in hindsight. You know what I mean? But I suppose I was a kid, and when I listen to stuff, say like Mick Taylor was playing when he was 16 and whatever, working with the Stones, I reckon he for the same age, he had a lot more. Sounded a lot more experienced and a lot more controlled in his playing, and compared to any of the stuff that I was doing, I think I was a bit. I just don't think I was as good as maybe people were making out. That's what I'm getting at.
That first Tamam Shud album is now considered a classic by many, a classic of its time. Has it surprised you, the longevity of that album, that it's still held in such high regard today?
Well, yeah, I suppose. I don't, from the point of view that, because essentially where the idea of the music came from and the inspiration behind the writing of that through Lindsay and the idea of the whole thing and the concept of it, I thought was really strong to start with. I mean, that's what I always liked about the Shud anyway, that was Lindsay's like conceptual viewpoint on things, and the original music aspect was, I thought that was great, really important, just like the bands overseas, here we are in Australia and we're playing original music. Isn't this great? So from that angle, it's a good thing that it's still sought after and people like to hear it, even though it was recorded like in 12 hours and pretty much live and a couple of vocal overdubs, but that's what it was like in those days. I suppose because it's a good thing, because it was a fairly essentially live and essentially still pretty sort of experimental, and the playing was what's the word? I can't think what's the word. When it just happens, spontaneous, a lot of spontaneity.
Yeah.
So that was a nice thing about it. I think that helped. It wasn't too controlled in its. Some of the arrangements were fairly organised, but a lot of the playing was just, go for it. There were no set kind of solos a lot of the time. People just did things, there were drum solos and all different kinds of things, and you just cut out and just sort of let loose, But yeah, it's good that it's still there, and it's still there and available for people to listen to.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, I suppose. It does surprise me a little bit, yeah.
About the Morning of the Earth soundtrack, that's a piece of work that's still looked back fondly today. What are your memories of that?
Oh, good, that was a great idea, doing that. That was a great idea of all those people, the idea of coming together and to do that soundtrack. Because it was the first film like that, surf movie, that didn't have a narration. It was just all music tracks. So that was really different. And originally, when David Elphick approached us and said, we've got this movie we want to do, and that Albie Falzon's made this movie and we want you to do the soundtrack. It sort of started out that way, and then we were going to do the whole thing. And so we started rehearsing and writing stuff, and we're doing all that stuff like we did, most days of the week in the house at Newport in Sydney. We used to rehearse and play pretty much most days. And then somehow or other, I think David Elphick got in touch with G. Wayne Thomas, who was a pop writer and jingle person at the time, and a bit of a producer apparently. And we knew of him, but David had... So G. Wayne Thomas basically got in to got the job of producing the music, and they decided to call a whole lot more people in to do some tracks as well, which I think is a great idea. I'm glad that happened, really, now, because it gave a lot of other people a chance to get on there, and it gave a lot of other people to get their stuff aired, along with this great film. Like Brian Cadd and Peter Howe and lots of other people that were on there. So it was great. We ended up getting 3 tracks on there, so that was good.
Yeah.
And the whole idea behind it was great. We loved the idea of doing that. We thought that was really good, nice and eclectic, and all that sort of stuff. So those memories, the musical memories, are really good. Plus, I mean, Nigel and I got to play on a few of the other things on there as well, like G. Wayne Thomas's songs, and also the Morning of the Earth theme. We played on that as well, so we got to do a few extras as well. So that was good.
So, how did you end up finding your way into Kahvas Jute and then back again to the show? What happened there?
A bit of a detour, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, the way things were, I suppose, it's basically I ended up sort of hanging around with Danny, the drummer, a fair bit in the shed, and I basically ended up, I was still pretty young, I suppose. I ended up siding with him a little bit on a few issues, and when the chance came to go and work with Bob and Dennis, Bob Daisley, and bass player, and Dennis Wilson, guitar player, I thought this could be a really good thing, and I kind of wanted to do it. I kind of got cajoled into it a little bit as well. So that was all right, but that was a great experience too. We went and hung out and wrote a little bit of stuff and recorded that album. I think that all happened within about, I don't know, it was only a few months. We went and did that, and then things changed again, and things were said, and there wasn't room for 2 guitar players anymore, and I was too young, and I was overplaying, and and it was all this kind of stuff came up, and it just kind of, and then I sort of fell out a bit with a couple of things with Danny, I suppose, a bit over a couple of things. I don't know, I can't remember all the details, but I thought, well, obviously this isn't good for me, so I thought, well, I think I'll wonder what those guys in the shut are doing. So I rang Lindsay and I said, hey, how would you feel about, I said, what are you up to? And he just said, oh, we're just cruising along, not doing. I said, how would you feel about coming to play again? And he said, sure, mate, come on over. So there you go. So I went over, and that was all really good. And that went for another 2 years after that, until the end of 72. By which stage, yeah, things were starting to change, and we decided to call it quits at that time, basically because it was getting a bit more competitive out there, I suppose. We didn't have a big sound system like a lot of these other bands, and there were certain things that didn't sort of fall to us as we thought they should have, so we sort of, it got a bit hard. Lindsay wanted to experiment more. He wanted to go off and do some other stuff with a band called Albatross. He wanted to get that going, so we just basically gave it a miss after a while.
Now, in between that and Ariel, you hooked up with Ross Wilson and Ross Hannaford for a short time, didn't you? Oh,
that was a very short time, yeah. That was the beginning of Mighty Kong, that thing, I think.
Oh, was it?
I think so. Yeah. And, we got to I got to rehearse with him for a while. Ross came, I had a band in Melbourne called Miss Universe with Nigel still, again, Nigel the drummer, and with George Lynn Bittis and Phil Pritchard from a band called Highway that came over from New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And they were in Melbourne at the time. So we had this band called Miss Universe, and it was all kind of crazy, and I was writing a lot of the material, and it was all right, it was okay. We'd only been together a few months, starting to still only feeling our way, really, as a band. And I remember Ross came round to the house one day and was looking for some people to do this new band, and basically he came around and asked the guys in my band whether they'd be interested. So he didn't pull any punches on that one. He just sort of came, which is all fair and love and war, I suppose. So instead of just a couple of them going off and doing it, I sort of ended up there as well, having a jam here and there, working stuff out with Hannah and Ross, and that was great too for what it was. But then it just didn't work out in the end. But it was a good experience. I still remain on fairly good terms with those guys. I think I haven't seen Hannah for a long time, but I know he's playing great, and I see Ross occasionally now and again. I've bumped into him in Tamworth a couple of times here and there and whatever, but I don't see those guys much.
What about your time with Ariel? That first album is, a classic and probably stronger than anything the band did later on. Why didn't you stay on there?
Well, I started... this is where I probably lost a bit of patience and lost a bit of faith with what was going on in things generally. I still don't even know whether I was in the right or in the wrong, but all I knew was that I never really knew what was going on financially and all that kind of stuff. And we were living pretty close to the bone, and I wondered why we were doing so much work and why we were kind of living so hard and doing all this kind of stuff. And I just got my back up a bit about a few things, and I ended up basically falling out for business reasons rather than musical reasons. Okay. I had ideas. I wanted to do more music as well, but I can't remember the things that actually happened, but there were things at the time that happened, and I just bailed out at the end and went, I can't work like this. Whether I was right or wrong, I really don't know. I was still, I don't know, 18 or 19 or something. Who knows? Maybe I didn't have quite as good an understanding of what was going on as I should have, or whatever. I really don't know. Just, some things you regret a little bit when you look back, but not too much. I'm still friends with all those guys, so that's a good thing. And the music experience was great. I really liked that band. I thought it was really good. I thought Mike wrote great stuff for that, and it was really exploratory, really experimental, and it was thematic and different. Quite a strong, almost semi-classical flavour some of the time, which was kind of demanding. I thought that was really interesting. So we sort of pulled on those experiences in music to make that work, and plus there was a kind of blues flavour now and again with a couple of things, of course, and it was great. It was rehearsed tight, and we rehearsed for a long time, and we do all that stuff. So it was a good thing to do. It was great.
And you went on the road with Stevie right after that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How was
mate,
that?
You've got a bit of a history here. You've got some notes somewhere. That was okay. That was all right. That was kind of rock and roll, Get out there and play rock and roll, son. And pity about that was, suppose there was no recording involved or any writing. It was just basically go out and play in the band, That was okay for a little while. That was a good experience. Yeah.
When you started forming your own bands in the 70s, I guess you really would have felt like the time was right after spending so many years but behind others?
Kind of. I probably thought so at the time, and I thought I was, writing stuff that was going to be okay, but I'm still not quite sure whether I had really much of an idea of what I should have been doing to be successful with myself as a career in music. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I was still wanted to play music, but I don't think I was as focused on some things as hard as maybe I could have been or should have been at the time, as far as writing material and stuff. I mean, in the late 70s, at 77, I'd been working with my keyboard player mate Peter Broughton, a drummer guy up here called Robbie France, and a bass player Peter Broughton, music producer these days. And we went to Melbourne, to go and play music, but the kind of stuff we were playing was like... it was like instrumental. A lot of it was instrumental. There wasn't much vocal stuff going on. It was experimental. We were listening to people like, as I said before, John McLaughlin and all these kind of influences. So we weren't really... The type of music we were doing then compared to the type of music we were doing 4 years earlier, say with Ariel or whatever, it was less and less commercial, basically. And so we were just playing music just to play music. And we were still hassling, people like Nucleus Agency and stuff like that to get us gigs, which they did. They got us a few gigs here and there. When I look back on it, I think, how the hell did they get us any kind of gigs with some of the material we were doing? But then again, I suppose it was a bit more of an experimental time across the board. There were more venues and a lot more things going on at that time. So maybe it was a little more... it was a little easier to do that, but we certainly weren't... the kind of material we were doing, it was more along instrumental stuff and playing and performance in that area, rather than doing songs and vocal things and say like the Little River Band or that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Or those kind of vocal bands. It was a bit. I suppose it was a bit self-centered, really, in a way. But that's what happened. And that's what we thought, so we just did it, you know.
I was reading a bio on, it might have been your old website, where you mentioned that period based here in Melbourne with your band as being a real financial struggle. I think even resorting to a little bit of shoplifting at one stage.
Oh, no, did I say that? yeah, well, you know, it wasn't not too chronic. I'm not talking about backing a truck up to the back of Rent-A-Vision or something. The odd can of sardines, you know, in the duffel coat, that kind of thing. I know, very naughty, isn't it? but it was like that, and it was I suppose, you know, lots of people go through that when they're young. I would imagine. I think my old man went through that when he was young. He went through that in Brisbane, I think. Hard times for everybody. Yeah. Not nicking stuff maybe, but just hard times. You know, four people living in a room and stuff. You know.
Do periods like that instill thoughts of perhaps sometimes giving it away, and or does it make you more determined to plough on?
I've tried to give it away, and something always happens. Either someone will give me a phone call and say, "Oh, would you like to come and play?" or I'll just keep going through it. Or, I mean, one thing that helped it that changed it a bit was in those days, I suppose, in the 70s and even 80s to an extent, you didn't really get to record anything in a studio unless it was kind of financed or backed by a record company. That's most people anyway, and they financed it, and that's the only way you got in there to do things, was if you were going to go in and do an album, basically. But the good thing that happened, I suppose, was how the recording thing changed now, and how people can record themselves now and do all that if they want to. I've always loved the idea of recording. It was always part of the music side of things. I always thought that was a fascinating thing, and it was always exciting to me. So fortunately, because that's changed and we can, you know, record in Pro Tools now or whatever music software and do all that kind of stuff, I've been able to continue doing album projects since the mid-90s, really. So I've just kept on going, trying to do that, writing bits of stuff as I go, doing blues stuff or any other projects that come up. So that's enabled me to kind of keep going in that way. The live music thing now is a lot harder for most people too, I think. Just doing gigs here and there. I suppose you can go out and play karaoke if you want to, but if you don't want to do that, you know, I mean, I haven't done a lot of my live gig stuff at all. I do, like last year I did a lot of stuff. I went out on the road a lot. I went out with Jimmy Barnes for 9 months and promoted that album, Double Happiness, with him for 9 months, which was great. It was really good to go out and work on that level again. It was really good for me and good for my chops, and got my head back into focusing on doing a professional job. It was great, but like normally, but that's not normal for most people. You know, normal for me now is doing as many projects and recording things as I can do with my own, for the people that I know and my material, or with other people that are doing things around the place. I've got some teaching, guitar teaching stuff coming up in colleges next year, so I'm looking forward to doing that. I think that'll be good because I can stop thinking about what it is I'm, you know, trying to survive doing, and start passing on some knowledge to kids and younger people instead, which I think is going to be a lot more positive as well. Take my focus away from trying to, you know, ever since I was a kid, it was always like, I'd really like to be successful in this business or successful as a musician or whatever, but the further you go on and the further you do, so how do you gauge success? By the fact that you've actually kept going, or you know, by the fact that you've made $1 million. What is it? You know, so I suppose from the fact that I've kept going and that I'm lucky enough to still be going, I suppose I'll have to settle for that, I reckon. Yeah. And that's pretty good because I can still, you know, there are things set up now where I can. It's like I'm going down south to record next week. I've got 2 albums to do next week, and these days, all these projects, you know, you fund them yourself. You know, you just do them yourself because you have to, and so that's kind of good in a way. You probably get more work done that way than you did in the old days.
You've never been afraid to pack up and move to where the work is over the years. You've had time based here in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, even some stints overseas. Would that be advice you'd give to young players wanting to succeed, to be prepared to get up and move out there?
Well, yeah, I think so. Even though I think I would, yeah. I haven't been prepared to move around as much as a lot of other people. I mean, I think back and I think, if only when I left London in 1974, instead of coming back here, what would have happened if I'd gone to America? I think of things like that, and I go, so I think that if you're going to get out there and do it, if you really got your heart in it and you really want to get that going, I'd say go wherever it is you think you got to go, and stay there and do it until you can't stay there and do it anymore, I suppose. Yeah, I'd say for sure. Well, look at all the people that say go to other countries to apply their craft. Especially I suppose with acting as well, or film, and music, of course. They go overseas and they go to Europe and go all over the place. I think there's so much more happening in the Northern Hemisphere with all that kind of stuff. I suppose with so many more people. I suppose that's not. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to work that out, but there are a lot more audiences over there, and there's a lot more industry, I suppose, for this kind of thing. But it's gotten better here too, which is good. It's great that there are so many festivals here now, for instance, that go off every year.
Well, that's a thriving scene, isn't it?
That's what?
That's a thriving scene, isn't it? Really? The festival season.
Yeah, the festival. I mean, you can't. There's so many. One guy I was talking to Al from the Blue Mountains Festival a few weeks ago, and he was saying that they had over 1,200 applicants for 2008 festival. Oh. Seven's already gone, but and that's in March, I think, or April this year. And they had that many,
That's amazing.
So there's a lot of people playing music out there, and a lot of people wanting to do things. So. I suppose we're going to just try. I was even talking to a friend of mine up here the other day, because there's not a lot of live music in Brizzy at the moment that we know of. He's just going to do a headhunting around to find some venues and just start to instigate more live music again, basically. Which is great. So I'm hoping that'll come off a bit. That'll be good, just to get out there and play. You know.
In recent times, your music's taken very much a blues direction. Did you really feel a pull to get back to some musical roots there?
Yeah, I've always liked the medium of the medium of playing the blues. The style of music is because there's so much freedom within it to do as little or as least as you feel you need to at the time to get the meaning of the intent of the song across, which I reckon is great. Acoustic blues and electric blues stuff as well. I mean, there's a blues doctors up here. I found out after I came up here in 2003, which the guy who had the band actually introduced himself to a gig one day. Says, "Excuse me, I'm actually the blues doctors." Oh, well, excuse me, I didn't know that. So that band was going in 1988, and I actually had the full band going, but logistics, we just couldn't keep it going. We had a couple of gigs here and a couple of gigs there in Sydney, but it wasn't enough to keep us going. We didn't end up doing any really good. Did a couple of festivals, a couple of things here and there. Did Goulburn, I think, once. And then so after that, basically, I ended up, I trimmed that down and ended up working with my friend Rob Grosser, who's a drummer and music producer, and we work together on that now. And I play guitar and he plays drums, and we kind of duo that out a bit more. But we're starting to experiment more with that now. It's kind of bluesy, but it's also a bit more eclectic and a bit more. I don't know, got a bit more of a street vibe about it now. And I'm not doing as much of the acoustic and the dobro as I started off with. I'm changing over and writing stuff more for the electric, which is really where I've done most of my works with electric guitar anyway, when it comes to rocking stuff out and doing blues. So that's going to be an interesting thing. Just going down to do a new bunch of recordings with that next week, which will be good. So, and we've got another blues album coming out probably before March, which is an acoustic set done live at the annual Brisbane Blues Festival in 2003, so that'll be good.
Fantastic. You've been doing a bit of work for the University of Queensland too, I believe.
Yeah, I was there for about 3 years as a part-time kind of like a project manager, research kind of person. It was an online archive. Well, it still is, in fact, and I was there to try and source material from people and see where you get people sort of all going, being able to get material and use it and reuse it and put it together and make something different out of it, and all the digital model stuff, and it was all kind of like that. But it was good for a little while. But that's really the reason I came up here, was because of that job offer, and I thought, well, everything was getting a bit quiet where I was. I had a few life change things going on in about 2002, and I thought, well, it's time to. I've been living in the same place for quite a while. I thought, I'll go back to Brisbane and have a look up there, and someone's offered me a job up there, so that's great. So I'll go and have a look at that, and here I is, still here.
So what else is on the books for 2007? Is there another Shud album in the works?
Yeah, there is. I'm going down to do it. That's one of the albums I'm going down to organise with the guys next week. There's a new Shud album with Lindsay coming together there. We're just in the beginning of that now. We're just going to cull material and rehearse that up and do some tracking next week. There's actually another John Lord album that's already finished. Remember, we did John Lord and the Hoochie Coochie Men.
Ah, yes.
DVD.
Yeah.
Well, we've done another one of those, but it's not a DVD. It's just a CD. It's a studio album. And that's the recording's been finished. It's just being mixed now in Melbourne. Actually, Steve Scanlon's doing some mixes of that in Melbourne. And I think there's Ian Gillan's singing 2 tracks on that. Jimmy Barnes is singing 2. And Jeff Duff is singing 2. And so that'll be an interesting... there's a few good covers on there and quite a lot of original stuff. And, of course, John Lord's playing some great stuff on it. And he did all his stuff in London a few months ago, so that's good. So there's that album. I don't know when that's going to be coming out, but it's started mixing now, so who knows when that's going to be. So there's a few things like that, yeah.
Plenty to keep you busy.
Yeah, keeping busy at the moment. Yeah, just starting again now, so that'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's about it, I think. Tim, thanks very much for that.
All right, John. Yeah, thanks for taking the trouble to contact me, and I hope you can get some sense out of all that.
It's brilliant. Thanks for your contribution to some mighty Australian music over 3 decades now.
No worries, my pleasure.
And I hope plenty more to come.
Yep, hope so too.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Good on you, Tim. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. See ya.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye. See you, bye.